We have a good agenda for you today. We will go over our band's SDK and also some of the greatest hits from our repertoire. We have a great agenda for you today. Like I mentioned, I'm going to introduce you to some folks on the call first. So we have myself, my name is Ricky, and I work on the mobile product team. And the scope of my responsibilities are really the apps and the SDKs. Then we have Naveen, our senior Android engineer. He's going to walk us through some code examples and some new features from the Android side. Similarly, on iOS, we have Ashok, who's going to provide code samples and also let you know what's new in the iOS SDK. Finally, we have Mina, who's our SDK engineer, who's going to be moderating questions at the end. So as you have questions, please use Pigeonhole to answer those questions, get those questions answered, and we will be addressing those throughout the session. So as I mentioned, we have a great agenda for you. We have a little bit of content for everybody for the iOS side and for Android, and you're going to want to pay attention to which section you're most interested in, if not both. We will be exploring some of the DocuSign developer documentation that's available, and we'll walk you through how to get those resources. Next up, we'll be diving into some of the use cases and some examples of how signing's been used in the SDK. And so we're hoping to provide you a little bit of inspiration there. Then we're going to go into some code examples and some features, do a little bit of a demo for some of the things that are coming up in both iOS and Android. And finally, we're going to end up with some Q&A. So hopefully that sounds okay to everybody. So now that we have a little bit of the housekeeping out of the way, let's go into the content. Let's start with a quick overview here. This is some of the basics of the SDK. And really the message is, if you are an app developer and you're looking to integrate e-signature into your app, you're going to want to look at the SDK. First, the SDK provides really some fundamental components to make that integration possible, right? But there's also considerable advantages to using the SDK that you should really take a look at. First one is the time aspect, right? You're going to see faster integrations with the SDK, and we're talking weeks as opposed to months. So that's a pretty big consideration as you look at the success of your project and how it's measured in terms of time. Secondly, there's the security consideration, and you can rest assured that the technology that you'll integrate into your app is the same technology we integrate into our consumer app, which serves millions of customers a month. And so your agreements will remain protected. So they're really, you should rest assured there. Then there is the cost consideration, right? And it's free to use with your existing API plan. And so there's no additional cost to use it. Then next up, you're going to want to take a look at service. Is your support available? And the answer is yes. We have extensive developer documentation examples on the web that we'll walk you through. We have customer service that are experts in this area who can walk you through the APIs and also the SDKs. And if you have specific needs for your project, you need advising, or you need someone to dive deeper and partner with you, we have professional services available as well. So let's take a look at the developer side. This hopefully looks familiar to everybody here. You're going to want to go in and create a developer account so that you can get access to all the features and develop against your project. And what you're going to want to do if you're looking for the mobile SDK is go under APIs, navigate into the mobile SDK area. From there, you'll notice that the website is really segmented into the Android and iOS area, but the content is pretty much similar. And what you're going to see is that there's some one-on-one content, some basics to get you started, to get you familiar with some of the concepts with the SDK and with DocuSign. So take a look at this. Then there's going to be step-by-step how-to guides, and these are extremely valuable, right? These will go through some of the more popular use cases and give you step-by-step instructions on how to implement these things. Next up, we have a sample app. And so this is great for those actually trying to kick the tires and figure out whether this is appropriate for their app. You're going to actually be able to play with our sample app, which is also included in the Git repository, so that you can build this or you can play with it here. You're going to need your demo account here to sign in. And so once you have that, you're able to go log into your account, give it access. And then in which case, you're able to go and create these agreements. And we're going to actually have a deeper demo on this later with Naveen and in some of the items that he's trying to introduce. Finally, we have some go live documentation and some SDK references here, where you can actually go through and look through all the class documentation for your needs. So that was just a high-level overview of like how you get resources and what's available. Let's go through what's in the actual SDK. So at a very high level, right, these are some of the features that are supported. You can authenticate to get access to your account, right? And then from there, you're able to perform a whole host of activities to really prepare the agreement. So you can cache the agreement that's already existing or a template. You can pre-fill these templates and make sure they have the information that's necessary for signing. You can also compose and create templates or agreements right on the device itself without needing any sort of internet connection. So it's all isolated on the mobile device. And so those are some of the preparation use cases that we have. And then once your document is prepared, you can go into some of the signing use cases, right? You can fill these templates and you can sign them. And then when you fill them, you use the same experience that we have for our customers. You could sign them using some of the native signing components that we provide out of the SDK, so you can have a little bit of a better experience and with some of the native components. You can do this with or without connectivity. We'll go into some of those signing use cases later. And then you could also customize the look and feel of the signing component so it feels more integrated and falls under your brand guidelines. So high level, this is what the SDK does, but we're really going to shine the spotlight on signing today. Signing is the biggest reason why developers integrate the SDK, because they're looking for that enhanced experience for signing. And so the SDK was originally built for signing reliability, I would say, to kind of service offline needs, because there's just a lot of different areas in field services or sales or different industries where you're unable to get that signature because of connectivity reasons. And so we built it for that purpose and also for the enhanced user experience on mobile. And so since then, we've ventured into many more signing features, and you can see some of them listed here. But really, we're going to go through a few of these here to make sure that we provide the examples and some of the newer items here to make sure that you're aware. First off is remote signing. Remote signing has been recently supported in the SDK. This is where you can download an envelope or an envelope was sent to you. And this is very, very basic signing where you get an email, you are requested to sign an envelope in an agreement, in which case you can do that through the SDK. And so we'll have some examples of how that works if you are the recipient of an envelope. Next up, we have captive signing, right? So captive signing is a great use case where you're looking to build something maybe for a kiosk or onboarding scenario. This is something where you want the agreement isolated within your experience, and you don't want to send off emails to the recipient. And so this is a scenario that has been used for terms and conditions or onboarding checklists or any sort of agreement that you need to set up and kind of facilitate an agreement there without communicating to the customer directly. And then there is a very basic way to sign without authentication to avoid any sort of security concerns with the tokens. And you could just provide the SDK with a signing URL, in which case you can have a little bit of a tighter integration with the SDK and the signing technology with your mobile app through the SDK if you use the signing URLs. And so we can spawn off the embedded signing, and we'll see an example of that later. So that was kind of a whirlwind tour of all the features and all the different aspects of signing. We're going to go into some of the signing use cases and show you an example of how customers have been using this. And so, as we know, the SDK has really serviced multiple industries, right? And we work across different companies, big and small. But really what is common between all of them is that they rely on a mobile phone or a tablet to really consummate that transaction. And so we're going to take a look at a few use cases here. First up, we have Claro. And so as you may have heard in the keynote, this is one of our larger API and SDK integrations. And so Claro is a leading telecommunications company in Latin America. They are heavy volume, so they're using about 29 million transactions and envelopes a year. And so it's significant. And with that, really, by using e-signature, there's really two things that they've done, right? They created a good environmental impact, and also there's a monetary aspect to this. So environmentally, they have reduced paper usage by about 8 million sheets a year. So that's pretty significant for the environment. Secondly, they've saved themselves quite a bit of money, $125,000 in paper savings alone a year. So this e-signature integration has been very fruitful for them. What they're trying to do really here is they need to finish off these workflows, these work orders that they have when they install internet. And so they go out into the field, they use their application, and they collect information from the customer. Then when they log in, they download these templates from DocuSign, and they have them on the local device. And so these are the templates they use for their work orders. And from there, they pre-populate the templates with the information from their own app, right? And they integrate the customer information into the templates. And they also want documentation on how, whether the customer actually signed and received services. So they take a photo of the customer or the ID, and they integrate it into that envelope. So they kind of prepare all this on the local device, right? Combining customer data, the photo, and then they spawn off the signing ceremony. And from there, what they do is they finish off the transaction, and then the technician, whenever they have good connectivity, will sync it back to the server. So it was estimated before using the actual SDK that 20% of the transactions were failing in the field just because there was just not good connection. You could get some of the transactions completed, but they needed something much more reliable. And so this has been a really good success story for the SDK and a real solution for this important customer. So next up, we have a public sector and government use case here, very similar to Claro, and this is just shining the spotlight on another in-person signing, offline signing scenario. And so this U.S. government agency supports other federal agencies by providing services and products. And so what they need to do, because this is a government deployment, they need to focus on security and signing reliability as well. So in this situation, just to go over their workflow, they have two in-person signers, obviously exchanging goods, and they use the mobile app to really document that transaction. So they have their own interfaces where they populate the customer or the agency information, and then they create these agreements from PDFs. So they actually have an agreement stored on their local device, and they use some of our methods to take that PDF and place tags on the agreement. And this is all done locally on the device, and then they spawn off the offline signing. While they're doing that, they actually tag the envelope with some metadata. And so that metadata will come in handy later as they sync the agreement back to the DocuSign cloud, and then in which case they facilitate searches and retrieval of those agreements from a different system, from their own document management system. So this is another example of how offline signing has enabled this use case, and how they're able to customize their workflow and then also get these agreements signed with the SDK in the field. And so that's a good example there. Next signing profile, we have auction.com. And so this is a real-time bidding platform for closures. They use DocuSign to onboard customers, and they really need to complete a security check before letting these users bid on properties. And so what they do is they actually have these templates that are cached on the device, and they create these envelopes on the device. From there, they sync these envelopes back to the DocuSign cloud. And whenever that happens, you get an envelope ID. And from there, they take these envelope IDs and then they spawn off embedded signing. This is online signing. And so online signing is a little bit different than offline signing, where online signing is more feature rich and has more complex scenarios like auth or formula tags or anything that's more obscure in terms of tag types. And so they are able to have much more sophisticated signing there. But with online signing through the SDK, you get some added advantages. Really, you can see that there are some native componentry here where we use some of the native iOS controls, and we also have just a better experience to start and to return to the host app. So there are some advantages, and really what Auction.com was looking for was really two things, right? They wanted to reduce the complexity of the signing integration, which means they wanted kind of a tighter integration between the signing app and our technology, right? Then they want to leverage some of our native signing components. So this is a really good example of online signing implemented in the field. And then finally, we have Resco. Resco is a mobile CRM, where they integrate both online and offline signing. So it's a kind of a special use case where they take advantage of both. They're using both APIs and the mobile SDK. So this is a field services use case. And when you think about Resco, know that they are a CRM that integrates with other major CRM players like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, and they serve as the mobile component to those CRMs. They are a low-code and no-code provider, so they can help customize and really tailor these solutions to the platform with that implementation. And they also specialize in field services and offline signing. And because we have overlapping customers with Resco, what the expectation is, if you are a Resco and DocuSign customer, you will actually give Resco access to your DocuSign account through OAuth. And so Resco has implemented the OAuth mechanism so that DocuSign customers will log into their account, provide access, and authorize Resco to make calls on their behalf. When that happens, what they do is they download these agreements and they create these agreements on the device, right? And so then they can be signed offline or online, and they, depending on the situation, they might sync it or not. And so this is a good example of how they kind of implemented both through OAuth, and they're able to set up that integration. What's also notable about this is that they're using hybrid development. So they're using Xamarin with C# to really implement their project, and they're taking advantage of some of our Android bridges to do this. And so with that, hopefully we gave you a good sampling of some of the ways the customers have used our SDK. Just kind of recap, we've gone through some of the basics of the SDK, where to get help through the documentation and the developer center, and we show you some really good examples of how the SDK has been integrated. But now we actually want to go into some of the new features that we have. And I'm going to turn it over to Naveen to cover what's new in Android. So Naveen, handing it off to you.
All right, let's jump into what are the new features we have in Android SDK. And then we'll jump into the demo of these new features. So with Android SDK 1.4.0, we split our SDK into components. So the advantage of having SDK as multiple components is that it will promote smaller binary size of your app. For example, if you would like to use only online signing feature of your app, then you could include only our online signing SDK, and you can add the dependencies as mentioned here in your app's build.gradle. Let's say you have a use case where the network is unreliable and you would like to use our offline signing feature. In that case, you can pull in our offline signing SDK and add it as a dependency in your app's build.gradle. And similarly, if you would like to use our DocuSign e-signature REST APIs right from our SDK, then we provide e-signature REST API component as well, where you can use right from our SDK. So all you need to do is like add that eSign API SDK in your app's build.gradle, and you get access to all the extensive set of DocuSign e-REST APIs. Okay, now let's take a look at what are the new features we have in Android SDK. So first, we have captive signing. So what is captive signing? So sometimes we want to get the signing done for the users who doesn't have DocuSign accounts as well. So in that case, you can rely on captive signing feature, and SDK provides an API to accomplish that. And similarly, if you would like to do remote signing, so we provide a feature called envelope caching, where you will be able to download the envelope from DocuSign server and cache it locally on the device. And once you cache it locally, then you could use it for signing, whether offline or online. We'll take a look at the demo of these features in a moment. And next, we have introduced a way like where you can access eSign REST API from SDK. So for that, we introduced eSign API delegate in SDK, where you could get access to all the DocuSign eSignature REST APIs. So we'll take a look at the demo for this feature as well. Okay, so now let's switch to demo. So this is the TJK sample application, which is already published in our native Android SDK repo in GitHub. So Olivia Lee, who is a stock advisor in TJK Capital Firm, would like to use TJK Capital sample application for signing agreements with their investors. So in today's use case, we'll take an example. Like there is an investor called John who would like to invest in TJK firm. And in this use case, John doesn't have the DocuSign account. So Olivia would like to get the signing agreement done for John. And in this case, we will like to provide the client number for the investor here, and then provide the investment amount. In this case, it's 300K, and just click invest in portfolio. This should launch the captive signing ceremony here for John. So now pass the control back to John, who would like to finish the signing. And this is the consumer disclosure screen. And just say continue. And if you see here, the document is already pre-populated with the data that we provided in the host app. So now we can see the client number and the amount which the investor would like to invest in the firm. So just finish the signing. So here you can draw the signature, or you can choose the signature here. In this case, we'd like to select the existing default signature and finish signing. So as simple as that. So once the signing is done, so we can provide an email where John will receive the email copy. And now the control is provided back to the host app, indicating the signing is done successfully. So please note that John does not have a DocuSign account in this case, but still we got the signing done through Captive Signing API. So now let's take a look at the code snippet, how we can use this captive signing feature. So as you see here, first we need to get the instance of signing delegate in SDK, and then invoke our launch captive signing API. So you need to provide the envelope ID of the envelope, and then provide the client user ID of the recipient. So you can also provide the callback listener here, where you can track the status of the signing ceremony. So in this case, once the signing is successful, you will get on success in the callback to indicate that signing is done successfully. And similarly, if there is any error during signing process, then on error is being triggered, and you will receive the details in the signing exception as shown here. And similarly, during signing ceremony, if there is any need for the user like to cancel the ceremony, so in that state, like so on cancel, callback will be triggered to indicate signing has been canceled. So this is the use case for captive signing ceremony feature. And now let's take a look at the example of using the remote signing feature, where the envelope is already cached in, is already available in DocuSign server, but we'd like to use it for signing on the device. So let's take an example here. So Emma is an investor who would like to invest in the firm. And in this case, we are using the remote envelope caching here. And we have a client number available for the Emma. And then we'd also like to provide the amount that Emma would like to invest. And then select the invest in portfolio button. So this will create the envelope and upload it to DocuSign server. And then once it is, once the envelope is created a DocuSign, so we can start the offline signing ceremony as you see here. So start the offline signing ceremony process. And as you see here, you have the fields populated with the investor data here. And you can see the client number and the investment amount. And then just finish the signing process here. So now that we have finished the signing, so we need to sync the envelope. So just, yeah. We have our sync API where you can sync all the envelopes. And if you want to sync a single envelope as well, we provide an API where you can sync an individual envelope. So please take a look at our previous webinars, how we can use the sync API. So let's take a look at the code snippet. So in SDK, we have envelope delegate. So we need to get the instance of envelope delegate here and invoke cache envelope API and provide the envelope ID. This is the remote envelope ID of the envelope that is at DocuSign already. And then we provide a listener where you can keep track of the envelope cache status. So in this case, once the cache envelope API is invoked, you will receive onComplete in the callback to indicate the caching is successful on the device. If there is any error, then you get on error callback with the details of exception, why it is not cached on the device. So now that we have seen like the way like to cache the remote envelope to the device. So now let's take a look like, so how we can do the signing once it was cached. So once we receive the onComplete callback, you can invoke our sign offline API, which actually started the offline signing ceremony process. So this is the standard sign offline API where we provide the local envelope ID of the envelope that is cached and provide the listener. So as simple as that. So this will start the offline signing ceremony. And once the signing is successful, you get on success callback to indicate the signing has been successful. So now let's jump into our third feature where you can use eSign REST API right from our SDK. So let's take a look at the use case here where we'd like to retrieve the user signature. In this case, Olivia Lee is logged in into the app as a host. So we can retrieve the Olivia signature using eSign REST APIs. So this is the signature that is already available in DocuSign web portal, which Olivia configured before. And let's see how we can use the eSign REST API in the demo. So in SDK, we provide eSign API delegate where you get the instance of it. And then once you get the instance of it, we provide invoke API, and you can provide the eSign API listener here. And so when you are using invoke API, where do we provide REST API? So you can provide that in the block here for the invoke callback method, for the invoke SDK method. So in this case, we are trying to fetch the user signature using the REST API. So provide the details that are required here. And then you will be able to fetch the signature using our eSign REST API. So this is just an example of how to use a REST API here, eSign REST API. So similar to this, you can invoke any of the eSign REST API. And so you'll be able to keep the track of the API status in the callback. So in this case, you will receive on success callback with the response in it. So in this case, we are fetching the signature. So it retrieves the signature information here. And once the signature is retrieved, get the response body, and then you can display in the bitmap as we have seen here. But this is an example to show how we can use the eSign REST API and get the response details. So similarly, as this is a REST API, there is a chance that there might be 404, 501, those kind of errors. So you will get the on error callback method that gets triggered when there is any such error. with the details of exception in it. So this is how you can use our eSign REST APIs right from our SDK itself. So SDK takes care of authentication and all those details. So I think this is pretty much about the new features we have in Android SDK. So with that, I'll switch over to Ashok, who will talk about the new features in iOS.
Thank you, Naveen. So now let's take a look at iOS SDK new features, and we will also see demo and code snippets along with them. iOS SDK, when it was launched first time, it had online and offline signing support using templates. Later on, we followed up with compose flow that allowed host applications to compose agreements using PDFs, recipient details, along with tabs. This time we have 3 new features for you. One is captive signing. Like what Naveen and Ricky mentioned earlier, it allows you to capture signatures where recipients don't have a DocuSign account. Later on, we improved upon this by providing alternative method to launch captive signing sessions without requiring iOS SDK authentication. It uses recipient view URLs. We will see how to generate these URLs along with the code snippets later on. And finally, in the later half of the demo, we will see offline signing demo with code samples. This demo would use the remote envelopes which exist on DocuSign servers. Let's jump in the code. On the screen, you could see that this is a Swift iOS application called TGK. The source code is available on our GitHub repo. In this app, we are using Cocoa Pods to get the latest version of iOS SDK. Once the iOS SDK is ready to be used, the host app needs to set up the SDK. If you don't want to configure the SDK, you could just use the default setup method. In here, we have an example of configuration. If, for example, you need to disable the iCloud, you could set the value false for the iCloud document enabled key. Once you have the custom configurations ready, you could use these to perform the DocuSign SDK setup. Now, before we go further and take a look at the web services call, let's see how we have some other resources to help you get started with captive signing or any other use cases. This is the DocuSign native iOS SDK page on GitHub. It has helpful instructions on installation, as well as one section on the support. It includes the guides, various sample apps and their links, and finally, how to reach out to us by opening an issue on github.com. We keep a close eye on all the issues and we respond as soon as possible. Other than these resources, we also have support files for various use cases. In here, we have a very helpful Postman collection for captive signing. We will be using it to see how to generate captive signing envelopes as well as get recipient URLs. On this screen, you could see that Postman app is loaded, and there are 2 services we would like to walk through. The first one is create envelopes call. In this post call, I have a base64 document and recipient information pre-filled. Once you send the request, you would get a envelope ID. This envelope ID is corresponding to the captive envelope you just created. Now copy this envelope ID and use it to fetch a recipient view URL for the given envelope. We would be using this URL to showcase the second part of Cap2 signing, which can load signing ceremony without iOS SDK authentication. So let's take a look at the first two features on iOS SDK with code samples. On your left, you could see that the TGK app has been loaded with my account, and I am going to take signatures for Tristan and Andrea. Let's tap on the Tristan's profile, verify the contact information. And once it's all correct, let's take a look at the agreement. At this point, the entire details are with the host app. And so far, only the app has been set up with DocuSign custom configurations. Let's see what happens when I tap on agreement signing process with Cap2 signing. The Cap2 signing function is right here. What it does, it makes a create envelope call with the access token. Let's take a look at the create envelope call. Right here is the same corresponding payload which we saw on the Postman request. We will be using this to make a call to post envelopes call. And once we have a successful envelope creation, the envelope ID, recipient username, and email, along with client user ID, can be used to launch Cap2 signing session. This is it. Once you have the envelope ready, all you need to do is to call this function, and SDK UI components will take over and load the signing ceremony. So this is the default agreement which you have to sign. You have to accept. Please note that all of the recipient details have been pre-populated here. And all I need to do at this point is review these details and sign. Let's select a pre-selected style and adopt and sign. Going next. After reviewing the PDF, I could tap finish, and the control will return to the host app. So this is the Cap2 signing session in action. We could also, so this variation was using the envelope ID and other details. Now let's take a look at how to use the signing URL to do essentially the same thing. In here, you could see the overloaded method takes in a signing URL, envelope ID, and an optional recipient ID. And that can be done to launch a Cap2 signing session. So this is it for the Cap2 signing. Now let's take a look at the offline signing. I'll switch the application. Here, you could see that there's no envelope currently available on the device. I'll do the very same thing which we did before. Verify the contact information, go back to the portfolio for Tristan, view the agreement. This time, the investment value is going to be $500,000, and we have all the required information. Once I tap on invest in portfolio, I'll have a new method to start offline signing with the remote envelope. Please note that this is a developer only alert, and in the real use case, you would not be seeing this. In order to showcase this demo, I already have an envelope ID, which I sent some time back. And I'll be using this envelope ID to launch offline signing session. Let's see how. In TGK sample app, there is a function called offline cache and sign. It has a method which calls to DocuSign envelopes manager with envelope ID to download the envelope. If everything goes fine and there's no error, we will make a call to launch the offline signing session with the envelope ID. In this resume offline signing session, we make a call to resume signing envelope method with presenting view controller, which is the view controller of the host app that will load the offline signing session, envelope ID, and an optional completion block. Tapping on offline remote envelopes will execute this part. It will create a copy of envelope on the device and later on show the SDK UI components to get the signatures. In here, you could see that SDK UI components have taken over, and Tristan has to accept the consumer disclosure and begin signing. All of the details have been pre-filled. And once I'm ready to sign, I'll tap on signature. And finish the signing ceremony. Once I tap on confirm signing, it would return the control back to the host app. Now let's see if the envelope is ready for sync. When I tap on sync, it will send the envelope to the DocuSign servers. And in order to do that, all we need to do is call sync envelopes method on DSM envelope manager. There are many helpful notifications that you could use to receive callbacks from SDK and customize your UI. Finally, let's check the status of this envelope if it got signed successfully. And it's completed. We also have captured all the details required. And that concludes the iOS demo section. Let's jump to the question and answer with Meena. Thank you, everyone.